So it's a big weekend for our Silverado. We're going to get probably about 60% of it done this weekend. Tonight's Friday night, and that's my painter helping me out. He is painting all the parts. He's going to edge them all, which if you don't know what that means, it's painting the inside so I can put them all back on later on this weekend. And my goal is to keep ahead of him. So as I pull parts off and he sands them down and gets them ready for paint, I'm pulling the next part off so that he's always got something to do and he's not standing around looking for work. So I pulled the hood off. Now I'm going to pull the sight shield off, closeout panel, whatever you want to call it. It's just a bunch of plastic clips. Now that that's off, we can get to the grill. 4 bolts across the top, and then it just clips in. Wiggle and pull. Kind of pulls up and out at the same time. Now the grill's out of the way, we can pull the bumper off. 2 bolts on each side and then 4 bolts in the center. We got the one plug there for the sensors and fog lights. Disconnects the whole harness, goes with the bumper. I can pull the headlights off. Just 4 bolts. And 1 plug. Same thing on the driver's side. Now we're going to pull the driver's door panel off. We're actually going to take the driver's door apart. And there's a reason I did this on the truck. And if you watch my other videos, I told you when I put the doors on, you want to do it with everything in the doors, because adding weight to them afterwards will change the alignment. So now I'm taking it apart, because when I put this door back on, I'm going to put it back together partially empty. So I'm stripping it down to that point, and I'm going to see how the door closes. So hopefully I can compensate close enough that I will only have to make a fine-tune adjustment at the end to get the door to close properly. Pull the glass out. Pull the door check out. Take the mirror off. Now we can pull the door off. You can take 3 of the bolts off and leave the top bolt on the top hinge, and that way you only have to hold it for 1 bolt. Now we got the door on a stand. We can strip it all down. Take the water barrier off. Pull the window regulator out. Pull the door lock actuator out. Actually, that was the window channel. Now I'll pull the door actuator out. It's the latch, the actuator, the lock assembly for the outside. It's all one big piece on these. Pull the wiring harness out. Now we can start taking the weather stripping off. You can reach on the inside and just squeeze the ends of the clips together and they pop off. Sometimes if you use the little fork, they break. And you can't always get a pick in there to release the tabs. We got that all apart. Now we're going to move on to the driver's side fender. Pull the battery out. Take the battery tray out. At least loosen it up. And start disconnecting all the wiring. Those are the lines for the washer fluid. Pull the junction box out. Squeeze those tabs together and lift up. And you disconnect all the plugs. Just a little tab on there and then you slide the plugs out. There's a mounting bracket for that junction box and that's what those are all mounted in. Now we're going to take that out right now. Disconnect the fender bolts from the cab. There's our battery tray. Pull the rest of the bolts off our fender and it's free. Pull the fender flares off. These are aftermarket. Just screwed on. I'll take the fender liner off. There's a lot of screws holding this fender liner on. Probably about 15. And we'll pull the airbox out so we can get to all the stuff on the inside of the fender. This is an aftermarket airbox. Now we can unbolt the box itself. Take it out of the way. Pull some more brackets off so we can get to the battery. Take the coolant bottle out. I'll pull the battery out. Then we can get to the rest of the bolts on the firewall. Fender's loose. Forgot one bolt. Take that out. Now it's out. Now we're on to disconnecting the cab. Pull the AC lines off. Pull the master cylinder off. You can leave all the lines connected to it. Now we're going to take the power steering lines off of the brake booster. Disconnect the steering shaft. Now we're going to pull the steering column out. Normally you don't have to, but I have to change it anyway. I'm going to need it for the other truck. So I'm just going to take it out of the way. You can just collapse that shaft if you're just pulling the cab. Now we're going to disconnect the emergency brake cable. Get to use my favorite tool. They do make a specific wrench to undo that clip, but if you don't have it, don't worry. Just take a, this one happens to be a 1/2" wrench. Slide it in here. And just pull the cable out. Pull the shift cable out, disconnect it from the trans. It's got a retainer clip in there. Pull that out, and you can just squeeze the two tabs together that lock the cable into the bracket. Now I'm going to unbolt our 6 cab mounts. Make sure you keep these in the same order. Sometimes they're different. They're color coded, but the colors wear off. So if you just keep them in order, you don't have to worry. Helps if you get the right size. That's better. There's plastic inside there that'll hold them in. So they're actually unbolted from the cab, but still in the mount. They'll just keep hanging there. Believe it or not, this is all it takes to take the cab off. I would have had to disconnect the DEF tank, but this one was already deleted. Now we're going to let the truck down and reposition the lift underneath the cab itself. Go up a little bit, stop and check, make sure we didn't miss anything. Make sure nothing's getting caught. And we kind of caught something there. We're all good. Full throttle on the lift. One casualty, caught the DEF tank bracket. Good as new. Now we're going to go finish putting our cab back together now that we have all our parts off our other one. Put the floor ducts in. Now we're going to put the airbox in, or heater box rather. Bolt the heater box in from the outside. Drain tube. Now we're going to put our pedal assembly in. These are power pedals. That's why the thing is so big. Now we're bolting it into the firewall. It uses the bolts that hold the brake booster on. Now we're going to connect the brake booster to the brake pedal. Now put the e-brake in. Slide the cable down in and then the assembly in, bolt it in. Now there's a junction box down here we're going to put in. This also came off the parts truck. The black truck had a broken one. Bolt the rest of the e-brake cable in. Now we're going to put the main part of the dash in with the harness. A little easier with two people, although sometimes things don't go right. That wiring harness at the bottom on the right is not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be at the top. I'm going to have to fix that, but I haven't realized it yet. So as I put stuff together, when I get to that, there you go. I just figured it out.
That's it, Lloyd. You don't get the help anymore. Give you one job and you screwed it up. The wires were in the wrong spot.
Then you got to give the guys that helped you a hard time, even though it wasn't really his fault. He's a good sport. Put that cover back on the top. Fish all the wires through and connect everything. Now we can put the dash pad back on. Kind of set it up there. Again, fish all the wires through it. And then you can slide it into place and start bolting it in. With the never-ending bolts for this thing. And yes, they all went back. I had no extras. Show you guys how I keep track of all this stuff eventually in one of my tutorials. Put the cluster back in. One plug. 4 screws. Put our switches in. Put our CD player in. And put the radio face on. Clips into place, and then it has 4 screws that hold it in. And I put the cluster bezel on. The top to the cluster on. Just pushes in. And then put our headlight switches in, trailer brake control. Just plugs in and then pushes in. Same thing with the bezel around the radio and HVAC controls. Now we'll put our glove boxes in. Put our A-pillar trim in. And put the little caps on. Carpeting in. I'll put the console in. Bolt the 2 bolts up in the front. We can plug all our wires in. Snap that top trim piece down. Now we can bolt the console down. 4 bolts, 2 on each side. Put the covers on for the rears. Fronts don't have covers. Now this is the motor out of our parts truck. I'm going to save the trans and transfer case, and I'm just separating the motor. We're going to put the one that we gambled on in here. This is the gambling one. Just taking off the fan. It was all bent. Now I got the oil cooler housing that I took off the parts motor, putting it on the gambling motor. Had to take the heat shield off to get to some bolts. Now we're going to install our new oil pan. That's brand new from the dealer. It was like 70 bucks. Pretty reasonable for a Duramax. Now we got our original motor all back together. We're going to install it. Well, at least put it together with the trans and transfer case out of our parts truck. It's on a forklift. That's how I'm moving it. Just slowly drop it down and move it in until it lines up, and we can put the bolts in. Then we'll tighten up the bolts evenly on both sides and draw it together, but we go all crazy and start really wrenching on it. Now you want to make sure that the torque converter still spins. If the torque converter doesn't spin, it's usually because it's not all the way in and it gets bound up against the flywheel, and that can cause problems. Don't ask me how I know. After I bolted the torque converter in, it's time to put the starter in. Can't really show the torque converter bolts. That's kind of in the way. Now we can put our fan back on. Took this one off the parts truck. And put the shroud on, or at least part of it anyway. Now we'll put our exhaust on it. And it's all ready to go back in the truck now.
So this was the Silverado's big weekend. The weekend that a lot of you guys have been waiting for, and I know I definitely was. I had to get everything set up just right with my schedules, my painter schedules, and the shop schedules. So that's why I did the other videos and got stuff done in the meantime, so I wasn't wasting time. I would have liked to put everything I did in this weekend in one video, but that video would have had to be either an hour long or I would have had to cut out a lot of parts. I tried to get as much in as possible because I want you guys to see what really goes into a build like this. So my compromise was 2 videos. This is the first one, and the next one will be next week, so you don't have to wait forever. And that video will be what I did with the rest of my weekend. This was Friday night and Saturday morning. The next video will be Saturday afternoon and Sunday. One weekend, and 60% of this job is done. I told you it wasn't hard. Everything went according to plan. Well, kinda. Mostly. In this industry, it went perfect because nothing ever goes right. So like this video if you found it interesting. Share it if you think somebody else might. Subscribe if you want to see more of this build, some of my other builds, or my tutorials. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Next week, actually.